This is reading response number 8, take 47. I'm Erica Williams. I'm going to start off by addressing the videos that we were meant to watch. So I watched the Understanding and Uprooting of Anti-Blackness, as well as the video. I can't remember the speaker's name, but she is drawing the correlation between South Asians and Black Americans, or really just Black people as a whole. Discussing issues such as colorism, um, the caste system there in India, and other matters. So I guess what I why I chose the video was just because I'm aware, like, across different cultures, that colorism is an issue, that, you know, people, like she was saying, people in their culture um, glorifying whiteness, or having the desire to be closer to that end of the spectrum, as far as being white or being lighter versus being darker, and the negative, just the negative treatment and prejudice that one receives when they are of a darker skin color, no matter what their cultural or ethnic background is. So I definitely found that presentation just to be kind of eye opening all around. Or I was just able to draw like a lot of connections with what she was saying. The caste system was a point of interest for me. I'd heard of it, but I didn't really know much about it or exactly what it was. So this kind of gave me the opportunity to do some light research. Not much, but just, enough to kind of understand the context a little bit better. So, and what I found really interesting about that was that, when people converted from, um, I'm assuming, most people were Hindu or are Hindu, um, in India, or at least they were before the British Raj came in, but that they gave better jobs to people who converted to Christianity, or what have you. So, just a lot of interesting things that I found out as I kind of went back and researched some of the things that she was discussing in her presentation. The Dalit Panthers, I thought that was a really cool a cool thing that she threw in there, a cool bit of information rather that she threw in there. And I don't want to spend too much time on that because I'm not answering any of your questions. So I'm gonna move on to the next video. So, Understanding and Uprooting Anti-Blackness within the education system, I believe is the end of that title. I really liked. Let me start with telomere. The telomere. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right because I took in way more information after um, watching that video, but just understanding how stress deteriorates your health and it ages you, and understanding how, you know, there's stress associated with being a minority, there's stress associated with being a black person specifically, just because the increased amount of just hatred that you encounter, even if you don't encounter it, knowing that it could be around the corner, all of that is it it weighs on you, and just to see the science behind it, I thought that was really cool. I like the bit about let's answer your questions. Uh, let's answer the questions. Um, the bit about people who black people who are able to kind of make it out of the barrel, um, and it being the Hunger Games. So yeah, you survived the Hunger Games, but um, what was the price that you had to pay? I just thought that there are a lot of interesting points made. I also wrote down the part about policies, procedures, and never the people. And that's kind of been my whole experience as a teacher. Just a little personal information. Part of why I've bounced around from school to school a little bit is just because I've worked with a lot of people who their focus, because it's their job, and especially when you move into administrative positions, your job is more about the functionality and running the school rather than focusing on your people, your students, your teachers, your community. um, and I commend like educators and administrators who keep that at the forefront of their mission and what they're trying to do in their communities. But the pressures from the state, I feel, just weigh so heavily on them. It's really difficult, and you rarely see the focus being on the students or the teachers for that matter. So that kind of just stuck out to me, um, as I was taking notes and watching. So let's just jump into the questions in the article. I hope I answered the question concerning the videos. I think I did. So I'm going to start with number 4. Slavery is legal. Um, my notes are so fragmented. And I wish I was like, I'm usually, y'all, if you watch my videos, I'm usually like, I have my questions set up, my answers. I'm a little bit more organized, but today, that's not really the case. So, the question asking, did you know that slavery was legal? Um, I knew that slavery was legal in America. If you're in prison or if you're being jailed, or well, I won't go that far, but even when you are arrested, if you've ever been detained, depending on who you are, I'll just leave it there. You don't have any rights. You're treated like a slave, or what you would imagine a slave would be treated, right? Like, you just don't have any rights. And the people who are over you, the COs, the people who run the jails, the prisons, they have complete control over you. Um, and there's really no other way to put it. They have complete control over you, over your story, um, if and when you receive medical treatment, uh, just everything. And on top of that, it's free labor. So definitely never want to go to prison, because you're already a slave. Once you go to prison, it's like signed, sealed, delivered. Okay, so moving on, then injustices that taught to me, or when I learned about injustices. So the questions were, when were they taught? How were they brought up? What was the language surrounding the topic? So growing up, black, like, this was definitely Um, this was along the lines of like the birds and the bees. We got the birds and the bees talk. You learn how to drive. You learn how to operate as a black person with authorities and in certain situations. So things that kind of just popped out of my mind, and I'm gonna try to stick to like three instances in my mind. So one of the earliest thing that just immediately stuck with me was a I like as a little black girl, like seeing images on TV. Um, you know, they have those specials, those documentaries, whatever, what have you. You learn things in school about Black history. So that kind of that's when society, not necessarily at home. At home, I was made aware of my blackness, but that's when, uh oh, I was made aware of my blackness, and all this context was given to me outside of my home. So, one of the first things that I remember, like, just being really impacted by was when I learned about Emmett Till and what he'd gone through. And I was probably, I don't 6 or 7 years old when I first learned the story of Emmett Till. And I couldn't, the first time I saw the picture of him, how he looked, like I was terrified as a little girl. It scared me. I probably didn't look at that image again until I was like in my late teens, because and if you've ever seen it, like, you know how terrible it is. But as a little girl under the age of 10, um, it terrified me and impacted me in a way where I just did not feel like, that let me know right there, like, okay, I'm not really safe in these streets. I'm not safe, and at any point, um, I'm at the mercy of white America and white supremacy. So that's kind of when it first stuck with me. When my baby sister was born, um, I just remember she was crying, and I don't know if these things were said to me as a toddler, but she had to have been like 2 years old, 3 years old. She was crying about not being able to get a soda. My dad had a soda. She wanted it. My daddy said no. And I just remember him. I was maybe 10 or 11 at the time. I'm 10 years older than her. Him telling her, like, you're black. Like, people are going to tell you no, you're going to be denied things, and you can't cry and whine about it. And she was like 2 or 3, and I was young. I understood what he was saying. Um, I don't, and that's just another thing that always sticks with me. So I don't want to harp on anything too long because I'm already at 13 minutes. So the history of Jim Crow. My mom was one of those moms who was like, she read the dictionary to me every morning. We did vocabulary weekly, so on and so forth. We read together. So the history of Jim Crow was one of the first texts that we went over together. And as a 12-year-old, I think I was like maybe in the 6th grade, the language was definitely over my head, trying to like chew through that material. But reading it with my mom, I just remember that experience. And as I started with learning how to operate as a black person, um, being aware of your blackness and what that means and how people receive that. That was definitely one of the ongoing lessons that I received throughout my childhood. Like I said, like along with everything else that you would learn as a child. So I think I answered all of those questions. Moving on to question number 2. How am I an ally for the voices of the youth? Thoughts on the article. So jumping to the article, I did enjoy the article. Um, I found it amazing that these were like fifth graders. They're so young, fighting for their school, fighting to have a better education and fighting for their rights. Essentially, I just thought that was beautiful, sad as well, because our babies shouldn't, they should be able to just come to school and it be a safe, efficient, um, you know, a beautiful experience for them. But unfortunately, that's not the reality that we live in. So it was it was definitely, heartbreaking as well. But I love to see them having that experience, um, having that fight instilled in them at that age. Um, Hearing about the other backstories that led to uh-oh, I'm blanking. Brown versus the Supreme Court. It just kind of reminded me that, you know, I wrote that we forget that it takes a lot of small movements um, to affect change, to kind of combine and become this big push, this big force. So I think that was just like a good reminder for me personally. Um, as far as being an ally or a voice for the youth, on a large scale, like on a social, I'm changing things vastly in my community. I wouldn't give myself that, but I do take pride in like being the teacher that gets to know their students. Like, what's going on at home? What's going on with you? What do you need? If I can provide it, if I have the money for it, whatever the case may be, an ear, whatever it is. So I think for me, that's how I'm an ally and a voice for the youth, just giving them somebody, um, just being one less person, and that kind of brings me back to what one of the speakers was saying in the video. If you're not going against the grain, you're going with the current. So I like to think I go against the grain. So moving on, creating a oh cool. So we can get to the piece, and I'm almost done. This is like the longest video ever. So this is the piece that I created, and basically this how does this represent my K-12 experience? So I started off in a school that was predominantly black. I was in the magnet program at that school, and then I transitioned to a school that was predominantly white. As I said before, my mom's a writer, so she's definitely a stickler for um, pronunciation, vocabulary, yada yada yada. So when I entered school, like it was a mission for her to make sure that I spoke a certain way, that I represented her well, that I didn't come off as like a little ghetto child, basically. So I learned like I said, I started off at a black school, so I learned at a very early age to code switch. Like by the first grade, I was code switching, and it was just, so that's what this kind of represents for me, going into white spaces and automatically feeling the need to like water down my blackness, and going into black spaces and feeling like I can be me again, or even in being me, in some cases I'm enunciating more than like my my family members, my cousins, whatever, what have you. So, now I'm going into those spaces, and I'm the white girl and all these other types of things. So that's kind of what this was for me, just the blending and the crossing over and the fluidity of it all. So thank you for listening forever. Y'all have a good day.